here?
Yeah, one of the dominant impressions I have coming to Glenville, that was in the day before health and physical education had been built. That was in the day before a Heflin Student Center had been built. And where the student health center, where the Heflin Student Center is located now, was the old college gym. It was a frame structure. And I understand there was a model like it at West Liberty, at the same gym, same style. But, and of course this building here wasn't here. This was Old Kanawha Hall, which was a men's and women's dormitory right here where we're now, where the Robert F. Kidd Library is located. But when I came, that was in 1946, right after World War II, I came here to teach English. And the science building had been built. That was a PWA project built by the Public Works Administration, which was a kind of a job creation. That was a PWA project. Louis Bennett Hall had been built at that time. And, but Pickens Hall was non-existent. So when you think about that, there was the administration building, Kanawha Hall here, and the library was up on the hill where Clark Hall now is. That was the Robert F. Kidd Library, and that was, it had been in existence I don't know how long before I came here. But that's pretty much a picture, I think, of the President's Home was where it now stands. It was when I came here in 46.
Is it much as it was when you first came here?
Oh yeah, there hasn't been much change on that. But as you can see from what we're talking about, just to briefly run back, with this Robert F. Kidd Library down here, the old Kanawha Hall was torn down. The old Verona Maple dormitory, where the Health and Physical Ed building now stands, it was torn down and the Health and Physical Education building was put there. The old gymnasium, the one I mentioned as being the frame structure, it was torn down, and that's where the Heflin Student Center now is. So that's basically what's happened. Down over the hill here, where the Pottery Center is, that was there at that time. It was in existence at that time.
Yeah. How is the, Glenville State's located in this rural area? How do you feel that that's influenced the growth of the school? And
well, I would say this, that you see, without being partisan, when you consider that Glenville State is the most centrally located of any state institution, including the universities, or the state colleges, or the community colleges, where they say the geographic center of the state is just somewhere near Sutton, West Virginia. Of course, we're within about 35 miles of Sutton, so we're pretty near. And when you look at it, look at West Liberty, within 10 miles of the Pennsylvania border, Shepherd over on the eastern panhandle, near the Maryland-Virginia border, Concord down near Virginia, Bluefield right next door to Virginia, Marshall next to Ohio, and Kentucky, and West Virginia, with 10 miles to Point Marion, 10 miles from the Pennsylvania border. So actually, the college is the most centrally located, and it is probably the most agrarian, that is to say, near the agricultural center of the state. And of course, that has influenced the kind of students we get. For example, they say, about Wesleyan students. Most of the students that go to Wesleyan are not West Virginians. They're from New Jersey, New York, and so on. And many of them are what you'd call the upper middle class. They've been everywhere. They've done everything. They've seen it all. And on the other hand, many of the Glenville State students come from small towns or farms or rural areas, and they haven't seen it all. They haven't been everywhere. And they are, I believe, educable. That's been my experience here, that the typical Glenville State College student is educable. There's nothing worse than a world-weary college freshman at 18. And the Glenville State College students are not world-weary. They haven't seen it all. They haven't been to France and traveled around over the world and so on. So The fact that Glenville State is located in a rural and agricultural area has influenced the clientele, the people who come here. And that's been its great strength, really. As I've said, there's nothing more boring than a world-weary college sophomore who's 18. Yeah. And these kids, most of them are educable, and that's a great strength of the college. And many of them have been highly motivated, career motivated, to not only to finish a degree. For example, you say you're already thinking about law school. You see? Yeah.
Do you feel that this fact that these students are educable, does that contribute to the success rate of Glenville graduates?
Well, I think so. They're motivated. Yeah, they're motivated to succeed, and they're from oftentimes many the graduates of this college are the first college graduate in a family. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes that's the case. Not always, but many times it's the first time a family member has graduated from college. And as a consequence, families back home look upon college education as the open sesame, the door to opportunity. And they're right. You know, that's borne out in modern times by statistics. It's not a very good way to judge, but it is one way. The average annual earnings of a college graduate is several $1,000s more than a high school graduate. Right. And so you're talking about a kid who comes here and goes to college and finishes a degree, has a greater opportunity to succeed in whatever he may choose to do than the typical high school graduate. Yeah.
See, you came here in 1946.
Came in 46, that's right.
How has the community changed and developed?
Well, I believe that Glenville as a town probably may be, and I think you could say that probably of any small town. After all, Glenville is a county seat town. It is an agricultural center as well as gas and oil. That's the big industry here is gas and oil. And I would say that generally speaking, I think the people in Glenville are a little more sophisticated, a little more intellectually sophisticated. But that may be true of any small town in America because of television and more travel, more accessibility to the cities. So I don't think you could make any claim that that's unusual in Glenville, but I do believe that people, when you say more sophisticated, what do you mean? What I mean is they're more aware of the world outside Gilmer County. They're more aware of the cities and cultural events and political and historical and economic events outside Gilmer County, when I say that, yeah.
It seems obvious now that that the college and the community are closely tied. Has it always been that way?
Yeah, it's been pretty much. I would say that, the old expression of town and gown has been pretty true. As I look back, there's never been what you'd call open hostility here. There have been some, minor fracases where you've had students get a little obstreperous, maybe a little drinking, or there have been a few close to race problems. We've never really had a race riot, but there have been some pressures. But there's one thing might be worth putting down. This goes back at least 30 years. At one time, the college did sponsor every summer a conference for attendance officers, the people who work for the boards of education, to see the so-called truant officer. That's not a very positive term and has been dropped. They're now called, I think, attendance officers or maybe some other title. But in any event, 30 years ago, before there was city-free delivery, everybody had to go to the post office to get his mail. One day, I went downtown to my post office box to get my mail, and there was a black in, this was in the summer, there was a black in there, and he'd written a postcard home, and I was buying some stamps. He laid his card down. I couldn't help seeing it. I wasn't trying to pry. But anyhow, on it, the card was addressed to his wife, and the card merely said, "No Jim Crow here." That said a lot, That said that he did not feel racial pressure or racial bias. He'd been treated as an equal here, and I thought that was a great compliment, not only to the people that ran this conference, but to the people generally in the area. You know, back in the days, earlier, you know, blacks couldn't eat in a lot of restaurants, you know, here in West Virginia, and couldn't stay in a lot of hotels.
Right.
So I would say that in that sense, Glenville has had a very happy relationship with the community.
Okay. You mentioned that you came here to teach English as a
Right.
professor. Describe some of the experiences you had as an instructor here at school.
Well, a story that I've told, the academic dean when I came here was a man named Robert Crawford, who was a former professor of mathematics, commonly known as Bob Crawford. One day, early in the fall of '46, I happened to be in his office. We got to talking about teaching as a career and whatever rewards there are. Now, mind you, this was in 1946. And he said to me, well, Espy, he said, a teacher is never paid as well as more glamorous positions such as presidents and deans and so on. But he said, on the other hand, he said, when a student leaves here, most of them will not remember me as the dean. But if they had classes with you and you made an impression on them, they'll remember you for a long time. You will have influenced their lives. And I think there was a lot of truth in what he said. Now, he said, you can't eat that kind of thing and you can't put it in the bank. But he said, if you have a decent living and you have no aspiration to be a millionaire, so what else is there, you know? Right. And I feel that has been pretty much true of my career here. Never made a lot of money, but on the other hand, I'm not downtown begging, you know.
Yeah. How has over the years that you've been associated with this school, how has the composition of the student body itself changed?
Well, 2 or 3 ways. One, when I came here, there were many older people out teaching on what was then called a standard normal certificate, about a 2-year, what would be comparable to an arts degree today. And the law in West Virginia had changed, and there was a great incentive to encourage these non-degree people to come back and finish their degrees because it meant a higher salary. In other words, the legislature really put pressure on these non-degree teachers to finish their degrees. And so not only in the summertime when your classes were largely adults, teachers out teaching who'd come back, but in the fall and in the winter, you'd have a lot of people who weren't teaching who wanted to finish their degrees. So, and then too, there were many GIs who'd come back from World War II, men who'd, you know, been in the Army, Navy, Air Force. And so you had a sprinkling there of adults, more so than you have today, although it's still an important segment of the enrollment. People who want, for one reason or another, have retired or they've got their family reared and they want to get a degree, to finish a degree and come back. But there was a strong sprinkling here of GIs under the GI Bill and of teachers who were trying to finish their degree. And I found that teaching these teachers was a joy in the summer. They were not absorbed in fraternity life and rah college stuff. They were serious. They were married, most of them. They were serious, and they were eager beavers. They were fine students. I always enjoyed teaching these teachers who had come back to finish their degrees. They were marvelous students.
You mentioned, you know, the GIs coming back from World War II, and you know, this was in 1946, year after the war ended.
Right.
Regarding World War II and perhaps the Vietnam War and on through things like that, how do you feel that our campus here at Glenville reacted to such historical events?
Well, I think you could put it this way. I came here, as I've told you, in '46. That was the year after the war ended. And at that time, the enrollment here was about 250. And the number of women compared with men, far I don't know what the absolute ratio was, but I would say at least 2 women for every man. But within a year, that had changed completely because the GIs came back and they had that GI bill, you know. And so the clientele changed in that sense that with your GI bill, more and more of these men came back to go to college. But during the war, there were very few men. As they said then, it's not a very flattering term, but as was said then, the only men who were here during the war were what you call a genuine forever. A genuine, everybody else had been drafted, was off, you know, in the military somewhere. And but there were a few men, but they were all genuine forevers. Now, you see, now you understand that, but I suspect there are a lot of kids out there that don't really know what a forever is. Would you suppose that or not?
Yeah, I don't think I would.
They were men who just, you know, couldn't, for one reason, physically handicapped or bad heart or whatever. They just couldn't pass the physical to get into the military. And the exams were so tough that it was pretty hard to fake, you know. If you went in there, you know, looking pretty able-minded, you were in, whether you liked it or not. You'd pass the physical. You would have passed the physical right off. There'd have been no problem. They'd have taken you in the day they looked at you.
So, overall these years through everything, what has, in your opinion, what has this the college being located in this small town meant to the community and the surrounding?
Well, it's at a number of levels. Number one, it's been the biggest payroll. Other than, I'm not sure whether the kidney shoe plant may have had a few more employees than here, but generally, it's right now especially. The college has been the biggest payroll, so it's had a tremendous economic impact on the community. It's had a cultural influence on the community. After all, the college faculty does live into the, some do commute, but most faculty come here, they rent an apartment, they rent a house, or they build or buy eventually if they stay. And so those people are out there rubbing shoulders with the people in the community. So there's bound to have been a cultural influence there. Mm-hmm. What I guess you'd call collegiality, you know, just maybe a little higher intellectual level. And then too, the college has provided an arts center for the community, plays, concerts, recitals, and that's been an impact. There are a lot of people come to these fairs and events that are not college connected, but they take advantage of this because it's an opportunity in a small town. If it weren't for the college, you could look, for example, at Grantsville, and I don't say this in any disparage for Grantsville, it's a small town, but if you looked at Grantsville and you looked at Glenville and you took the college out of Glenville, you'd be looking at Grantsville right here in Glenville. You'd have another Grantsville or a Burnsville. Mm-hmm. So the college has had a cultural and economic impact on the community.
How do you feel that Glenville has met the needs of its service area?
Well, you know, as the old expression is certainly not new with me, but you judge a college on its product. And when you look at the achievements of our graduates, no one can dispute the influence has been. Just for example, I'm sure you probably know this, the last 3 outstanding teachers in West Virginia for 3 years, the last 3 years, have been Glenville State College graduates. Mm-hmm. And at one time, I don't know whether it's true today, but at one time, not too far back, there were more county superintendents, graduates of Glenville State College, than any other college or university in West Virginia. More county superintendents. So, you know, you've got to say that their influence has gone down. And then looked at industry and looked at business. Many of our people have done well. Many of them have gone on to advanced degrees and have come back to teach in West Virginia. And many of them have come back to Glenville. At one time, the North Central Association criticized this college because we had too many of our own graduates teaching here. But that was a strength and a weakness of the college. There is a danger of inbreeding, you know.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, these people were not here using Glenville State as a stepping stone to Marshall or West Virginia or Penn State or VPI. They put their roots down. They wanted to stay here. So I think all in all, they were more dedicated, more committed to the college, and therefore probably better teachers than the individual who comes here thinking, well, this is just I've got to build up my vita here a little bit and get a few years under my belt, then I'll move on to something more glamorous and glorious. So I think in that sense that the college has had a faculty that's, you know, I won't say the non-pareil, they're without equal, but I think generally speaking you have to say that we've had a faculty of dedicated teachers here. I think that is a safe assessment to make. And that doesn't mean there haven't been some here who weren't where the tinker's den and should have been fired the day after they arrived. But I hope that they were in the minority, and I think they were.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You're actually really, in the long measure, you're a better judge of that than I.
I keep my opinions to myself.
I don't know if that's always necessary. Yeah.
Right. I've had some excellent professors. So I mean, they've influenced me greatly.
Well, that's, you know,
Yeah.
you're answering your question better than I can answer it,
Right,
really.
yeah. Glenville, just in the past few years, has expanded their course offerings.
Yeah.
And how, you know, what types of courses were offered, say, in the 40s and 50s?
In the era before the community college concept and before the associate arts degree, Glenville State was primarily a teacher training institution. And there were students who went for the BS degree, especially those who wanted to be doctors or who wanted to go on for an MS or a PhD in science. And they were non-teaching. But other than that, you didn't have the two-year programs that you now have with the associate art degrees, many of them, and the community college here, two-year courses. And so actually the course offerings and the degree offerings were much more limited than they are today. That doesn't mean that they were weaker by a long shot. One should not draw that misimpression that because of it may have somewhat worked the other way. I'm not sure about that. I want to reserve judgment on that.
There just wasn't the variety.
That's right, exactly. That is exactly right, yeah.
You've made several references comparing Glenville State to other schools in the state system of colleges and universities. How do you feel over the years that Glenville State has fit into that system?
Well, of course, legally, we're all governed by the legislature, and then before the present system, we had a board of governors in West Virginia that governed not only the state colleges and the community colleges, but the state universities. One board did the whole thing. Then, I think it's been about 5 years ago, the legislature, for its own reasons, I guess you could be charitable and say, the legislature in its greater wisdom decided to go for two boards. So now we have a board of directors that governs the state colleges, the community colleges, and then there's the University Board of Trustees that operate West Virginia, Marshall, the med school over at the osteopathic college at Lewisburg.
Right.
And then don't forget Parkersburg and Potomac State. They operate that, the Board of Trustees. So now you have really two separate bodies, and you can argue either way. It's probably a moot point. Which is better? I don't know. I can't say.
Over the years, Glenville State has been faced with some adversity. How have the school confronted these problems they've had?
Well, I guess one thing by maintaining one thing that there is a climate here on the campus of what I would consider to be pretty much open and free discussion. That may be dangerous,
Yeah.
but it continues. I was interested in that sense. I'm not dodging your question, but for example, just in the Charleston Gazette 2 days ago, there was a story about the Senate, the faculty senate down at Southern Community College, located in Logan. The faculty senate, by unanimous vote, voted to ask the president to resign, and if he wouldn't resign, the vote was to ask the Chancellor Trump, to ask the board of directors to fire him. And that was a pretty courageous thing, you know. That,
Yeah.
Of course, if you have the whole faculty operating in unison, it's pretty difficult to fire a faculty and make it stick, you know.
Yeah.
You might fire a couple of people or three, but you can't fire a whole faculty. So, and what will come of that, I don't know. But when you talk about adversity, you can talk about economic adversity. You can talk about the great tendency here in West Virginia for colleges to broaden their curriculum. Fairmont, for example, has gone in a number of directions. And but I think that Glenville has modified its program. It's modified its course offerings. We do have a center now in Richwood. I'm sorry, Summersville. It's in Summersville, it's called. In Summersville. We're establishing a center over in Lewis County. And at one time we had a center in Parkersburg, but that's since they're part of the university, that's gone to the board. But in short, there's been an endeavor to take education to the people here, to open up opportunities for people who have full-time jobs to take night courses or part-time courses in the daytime. So there has been an endeavor to expand the offerings to meet changing needs.
And that's further influenced the community and surrounding.
Oh
areas.
yes, that is correct. That's right.
Do you feel that over the years that Glenville has, you mentioned that they were controlled by the legislature, has the school been supported adequately by political measures?
Well, that's a very difficult question, a very iffy question.
Right.
I guess you'd have to say that as the state has gone and as other institutions in the state have gone, we've done about as well as the other institutions, I think. For example, Concord, salaries are probably higher. They may be a little higher at Shepherd than they are here at Glenville. I know they're higher at Fairmont than they are here at Glenville. But the legislature would say, well, Glenville's a small town. The cost of living in Glenville's not as high as it would be in Fairmont, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty, I'd say that's pretty forced thinking. But that's the attitude that the legislature would take. But I would say that one of the things that really has disturbed me, and I want to put this into this record, that has been happening not only, well, it's been happening over the state, and perhaps in many other states, that increasingly the financial burden of going to college is being transferred away from the state to the individual. Increase in tuition, for example. That passes the buck to the student. Instead of the legislature appropriating funds to operate a state college or a state university, the university is passing the buck off to you people by increasing your tuition. And I don't think that's good, for the simple reason that it denies a lot of people, a lot of young people, a college education. You every time you go up $100, you're probably eliminating so many kids who just can't make it at that level. They just don't have the money.
Right.
And that's been true in West Virginia. That criticism has been made widely. It's not original with me. But the legislature, on the other hand, tax dollars are hard to come by, and everybody's trying to cut taxes. So it's a real rat race. But I read the New York Times, I read the Washington Post, and this is happening all over the country. It's not limited to West Virginia. It's going on in Ohio, it's going on in Kentucky, it's going on in California.
Right.
But when you consider what it costs to go to a state-supported college as well as a private school, for example, Wesleyan costs about $18,000 a year to go to Wesleyan.
Mm-hmm.
That is room, board, books, tuition. I don't know what it is here. 10, would that cover it?
It's $1,000 a semester, pretty much.
That's for tuition.
Right.
Yeah.
Probably $500 for books.
Yeah. So you see, you're talking about smaller bucks by a long shot at the state colleges. Of course, you know, the private colleges will give this answer. Well, of course, they're going to stress it. We give a good Christian education. Well, they teach the same Shakespeare that we teach.
Yeah.
And they teach the same William Wordsworth or Emily Dickinson that we teach. Now, the one thing they do that we don't require, they do require attendance at a chapel where there's praying and reading the Bible. But that you can't do that in a private school. And if that makes a difference, then there is a difference. But I say that's just propaganda myself. I don't believe a word of that.
History.
That there's more Christian education. You know, my wife went to a small private college. She went to D&E.
Mm-hmm.
She's a D&E graduate. She was a president of a sorority, so she knew what was going on socially. When we came here to Glenville, we chaperoned a lot of the dances here. She couldn't believe the difference in the sobriety of the students at dances here compared with what she'd seen as a student at D&E, a good Presbyterian college.
Really?
That's right. She couldn't believe the difference to the sobriety. Drinking liquor was a way of life. These students, many of them were from the East.
Yeah.
They were Eastern D&E students, just as Wesleyan. Many of their students come out of New Jersey and Newark. There are people who didn't make the Ivy League, oftentimes.
Right.
And there was a big difference. The level of sobriety here at Glenville, she was amazed. She just couldn't get over it.
Hmm.
What it is today, I really can't answer that. I'm not saying that there hasn't been drinking at Glenville State College dances. I'm talking to the degree, the extent, and the amount.
Right. That's interesting. Well, to get back to the school itself, I've been fascinated from researching this class with the college farm. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, right. Well, I don't really know the origin of the college farm, but the college did have a program in agricultural education, and the farm was the laboratory for that. And for example, they had a first-class dairy. The dairy here was approved by the state, and they furnished all the milk for the dormitories. I don't know how many cows they milked out there. But they also grew swine that furnished pork, and they did a number of crops. To what extent, I really don't know that. But it was a 2-year program. It was not a BS that you would get at university in agriculture. It was a 2-year program, kind of, well, almost what you call a associate degree, although it wasn't called that because that hadn't come into existence yet. But it was located out where the tennis courts are. That's where the farm started and went out past the football field. That's where the farm was. You might be interested that a man by the name of Warden Lane was an agriculture professor here at one time, and he used to say, that was one of his standard remarks, he'd say, you bring these farm boys in here to Glenville, they find out where the student union is. He says the first semester they're fine, they're work. But he said after that, many of them are worthless. They're down there in the courting the girls in the student union. You can't get them out there on the farm. That may have had a slight bit of exaggeration, but that was Warden's expression. He became a state agriculture commissioner of West Virginia.
Oh, really?
He's now dead, yeah. Yeah, Warden Lane, yeah.
Huh.
One thing you might ask me, you happen to, is about the level of the quality of the students. Or were you going to ask me?
I was going to.
Okay, we'll just wait.
We can go ahead and talk about it right now if you'd like to.
Well, of course, you know, I cannot speak for the whole college, But I can speak for what I know best, the people who were English majors and who majored in English and went on. And I could illustrate that by a couple of examples. A young man came here from Cumberland, Maryland. I never did understand why he came to Glenville. A young man by the name of Randy Stein, Randolph E. Stein, came to Glenville. And he wanted to be an English major, so he started right out taking classes in the English department. Had several classes with me, both required and elective courses. And it was a brilliant student, just brilliant. And he graduated from Glenville as summa. And he wanted to go on to graduate school to get the PhD. So he applied for a graduate assistantship over to IU at Athens. And I wrote him an excellent letter of recommendation. You know, there was nobody like Randy. Well, the long shot of it was that he did get the assistantship. And he went from the AB to the PhD, and he was the first PhD in English from that institution. They were just starting their program. But he had a straight A average from the AB. He had the AB and he left here. And he graduated from IU with a PhD in English, a straight A average. And I got a glowing letter from the chairman of the English department at IU saying to me, in effect, if you have any more Randy Stein, send them over. We can use a lot of them. Yeah. Well, now, not every student came here with a Randy Stein. I'm not implying that. But I'm just citing that as an example. I want to cite one other example that I think is indicative. Oh, yeah, a couple of examples. One I was telling you about. A girl became editor of the paper here. I can't remember her name now. But she was a very bright girl. And I believe that by the time she graduated, she'd been married twice and divorced twice. And one summer, in a divorce, while she was being divorced, she went out to the University of Minnesota, to the School of Journalism. She was a journalism major here and was editor of the paper. And she went out to the University of Minnesota and took some journalism courses this summer. And her professor one day said, Miss So-and-so, where did you learn to write like you write? He said, you know, you're the best writer in this class. And he said, I noticed you're from Glenville State College down there in West Virginia. Did you learn to write down there? Oh, yes, she said. They have a great and strong writing program down there. He said, tell them to send us some more up here like you. Then another student I want to tell you about was a fellow by the name of Frank Paff, who was highly recruited here for the football program, the athletic department, as a quarterback. He was from Westminster, Maryland. That's near D.C. And he was an outstanding high school quarterback. And they recruited him here with all the scholarships they could give him. And he came down here and played 1 year, and he was really a hot shot. They had great expectations for him. Frank took some English classes. He took some with me, and I never really tried to brainwash him or proselytize him, never. But he just fell in love with literature and English. And he just kind of went hog wild. He quit the football squad and said he was going to be an English major and he was going to get a PhD in English. That was his ambition. That was about the time he was a sophomore. Well, he graduated from Glenville with honors. And since he was from Maryland, he knew the D.C. area, and he somehow found out that American University in Washington was starting a new program, what they called University Fellows. They were going to appoint 12 people with A.B. degrees who would become graduate assistants and do undergraduate teaching while they were working on their own PhD degree. And Frank got one of these, and he found out that he was competing with, most of them were from Brown, or Syracuse, or Dartmouth, or Princeton, or Harvard, or Yale. Wasn't anybody from West Virginia. And Frank told me, he'd say that sitting around drinking coffee with these guys, they'd say, where did you say you're from, Frank? Glenville State College. My God, where's Glenville State College? Never heard of it before. But anyhow, in one of these literature classes, the first paper they wrote, the professor handed back the papers. And he didn't hand Frank's paper. Now, Frank told me this. He didn't hand his paper back, and Frank thought, my God, it must have been so bad he's torn it up and thrown it in the wastebasket. And so when he got them all back, he had this one paper, and he said, looked at me, and he said, you're Mr. Paff, right? Yeah, Frank Paff. He said, Mr. Paff, he said, I want to commend you on the quality of your paper. He said, it is undoubtedly the best paper written in this class. And he said, it's so good that, with your permission, I'd like to reproduce it and hand it out as a sample of what a scholarly paper ought to be like. And I thought that was a pretty high credit. Now, we don't have very many Frank Paffs either at this time. But I'm just saying that. On the other hand, you can look around in the area and find English majors teaching English here in West Virginia, in Parkersburg, in Charleston, Fairmont, Wheeling, Clarksburg. Many of them have done very well. Incidentally, a graduate of this college, a guy by the name of Joe Riddle, who was from Grantsville, got his A.B. and graduated from honors with an English major. And he wanted to go out to the University of Wisconsin. I don't know why that was, but anyhow, I helped him get an assistantship out there. I wrote him a letter to the chairman out there, point out that he was an outstanding student. Well, he went out there and got his master's degree and his PhD in English. And he wrote his dissertation on Wallace Stevens, the American poet.
Mm-hmm.
And when that dissertation was published, and I don't know whether the book's still here in the library or not. I had 3 or 4 bought. The students kept stealing them. But the title of the book was The Clairvoyant Eye by Joseph M. Riddle. And it got the reviews as being the best book on Wallace Stevens. And there again, we don't have many Joe Riddles.
All right.
But I'm just saying, here's an example of a specific instance of what one of our graduates could do. But I think that all in all, we can say that I really believe that the great thing, if there is such a thing as greatness about our graduates, is the fact that most of them had to demonstrate ability to write and to think and to respond to literature. And I think that made them into better teachers. You see, some English programs specialize in biography, the lives of the poets, or they specialize in criticism. What did the critics say about Hamlet?
Mm-hmm.
But here the emphasis was on Hamlet, the work itself. And I think that made for better teachers. Okay, you have some other questions, or have we run out of time?
I have some more if you're not in a hurry.
I'm no hurry.
See, you mentioned that the fellow that came here to play football.
Yeah, Frank Paff, yeah, from Westminster.
How much of an influence do you think that extracurricular activities have had on the school? What kind of influence?
Well, that's a good question, and it's difficult for me to answer. Until the modern era of the present coach, football, now, in '58, I believe, I just went to a alumni dinner this past weekend, and they honored the coach, a football coach, a man by the name of Nick Murin, who took Glenville in 1958 through an undefeated season, and WVIAC championship. And in the days before I came here, Glenville dominated the basketball scene in West Virginia. The coach was a guy by the name of Nate Rohrball. He was gone by the time I got here, but he's a legend, as I'm sure you must know. He was a legend here. And people who knew Nate and knew his teams told me that they thought that one of the reasons that Nate's teams were so successful, that he had an uncanny ability to see a boy who was undeveloped but who had potential as an athlete. And he got boys that the university snarled at or ignored. and he brought them in here and developed them into great basketball players. And so there's been no doubt that this was a basketball college in that sense when Nate Rohrbaugh was here. They dominated the WIA and won it hands down. I don't know how many years in a row, and went off to Kansas City. I don't think they ever won the national championship, never. But they went. They did play out in the national tournament. That has been changed with the present coach, football coach.
Yeah, I played for him.
Yeah, well, you know him better than I, yeah. But obviously, he's a very successful man, you know. Glenville doesn't have the drawing power that WV or Marshall would have. But now, of course, you know, take Scott Otis or Jed Drennan, quarterbacks that Don Neal couldn't see.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe they lacked that ability that Nate Rohrbaugh had. They couldn't see the potential greatness.
Right.
Yeah.
Chris George.
Right, Chris George, right, yeah. All-American, yeah.
Yeah.
And what did you play on the team?
I was a wide receiver.
Oh, were you? Yeah. Yeah.
I have
Where are you from?
Braxton County.
Oh, you're Braxton County, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I have a heart condition now, and they'll let me play anymore.
Oh, is that right?
Right.
What do you have, arrhythmia or a bad valve or what?
Arrhythmia.
Yeah. Welcome to the club. I've got arrhythmia.
My mother has it too. So.
Yeah. Yeah. As long as you does coffee or alcohol stimulate it and bring it on,
Mm-hmm.
it does for me. So I drink decaf. I don't drink. I have to stay away from caffeine.
Yeah.
And I take some kind of a pill, and I can't remember these names. But anyhow, it's a beta blocker.
Right.
Are you taking a medication?
Yeah.
Beta blocker?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Yeah, that's probably it. Yeah, it's the rhythm of the heart. That's really what it is. Yeah, you look healthy you look healthy. But I don't think you have to worry that as long as you don't get overweight or abuse yourself in some way with drugs or alcohol, I don't think you'll have a problem. You'll die with the arrhythmia, not from it.
Yeah, that's what they tell me.
Yeah, you'll die with it, not from it.
As long as I don't play football anymore.
Yeah, well, of course, the strain and the stress and so on. How'd you like Rich? Is he a good coach?
He's excellent.
That's what I think, yeah. A lot of people I hear around over the state, think that he ought to be Don Neal's successor. Do the squad boys talk about that?
Somewhat. We all thought he'd get the Marshall job when Jim Don left for Georgia.
Uh-huh.
He's absolutely. I played at Fairmont for a semester too, but Coach Rodriguez is absolutely the best football coach that I've ever been associated with.
That's interesting. I'm glad to hear you say that. Yeah.
He's
well, as we recognize, he doesn't get the. Of course, success gets success. He's getting better players
Right.
because he's been successful.
All right.
But he'll not get the players that might make it at VPI or Notre Dame. But he's getting some good players. There's no question about it.
Excellent.
Yeah. And what are the who's going to be Scott's successor?
Rod Smith.
Well, he played last year. They say he's as good or better than Scott.
He's
Huh?
smart.
He's smart, huh? Yeah. I hope he does well.
Very intelligent.
Yeah. I'm very enthusiastic about the football program here.
Yeah. I miss it some, but I like to go watch them. There's still my buddies out
Yeah,
there.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we have a number of our English teachers in Braxton County High. You studied English with some of our graduates.
Yeah. Shirley Schumann.
Yeah, I know. Oh, yeah, Shirley.
Yeah, she's
And
my-
Shirley. Yeah, Ron Schumann and Shirley James. Yeah,
Yeah.
she was. Yeah, is she a good English teacher?
She's excellent.
That's what I thought. You see, she was my advisee.
Yeah.
She majored in English here. Yeah.
I had to work hard in her class because she's my mother's sister.
Oh, boy, it's a family matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. There's pressure on you there, right?
She worked me harder than any teacher I ever
Yeah,
had.
that's not all bad.
Oh no, she was excellent. She
Yeah.
was great. And her husband,
Yeah, Ron, you probably don't know this, but there was a really marvelous theater man here. Some people call it the golden age of theater here at Glenville. Bill Coleman, William S.E. Coleman, who came here from Slippery Rock, Pennsylvania. And when he left here, he went to Pitt and got his Ph.D. in theater, and he's head out at Drake. He's head of the theater department at Drake. But anyhow, he did Death of a Salesman, Arthur Miller,
Mhm.
and Ron Schumann was Willie Loman, the salesman. And that was that. Yeah. Yeah, Willie Loman. Hey, he was a marvelous Willie Loman, yeah. Just super. Yeah.
They're pretty special people.
Yeah, they are. And there are a lot of others up there too teaching English. I don't know their names right off the top of my head, but there are several other people there. And you know, as somebody said to me, if Braxton County is not a good school, you better look to Glenville State College.
Yeah.
Because many of the teachers are from Glenville State College.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I gotta get an excellent education.
Well, I'm pleased to hear you say that. That's a very high compliment.
Yeah.
You can judge it now. As a high school boy, you couldn't judge it as well, but you can look back now with a little more maturity and better judgment, and you can judge it. And I'm pleased to hear you say that. I think that's marvelous.
You didn't know you were getting that education at the time.
Well, you know how it is. Yeah. How can a high school boy know what's best for us? My God, you know. Well, as I used to say, not only do they not know anything, they don't know that they don't know anything. Right?
Yeah, pretty much. Well, if you could answer one more question for me.
Ask me.
I always like to ask this at the end of an interview. What is your most memorable or fondest experience
Here?
at Glenville State?
Boy, that's very difficult. My most memorable or fondest experience here. Well, I'd have to say this. It would be, you'd have to make that plural, experiences. But it's been in just what's happening between you and me here. The exchange of ideas with students in a non-academic setting.
Mm-hmm.
This is non-academic. Right. One of the great places that I enjoyed that was in the Literary Society. Now, I started that here, and students came to that, and it was kind of it was open to everybody, and you were your own boy, you know, and nobody was giving any grades, there were no papers to be written, and none of that stuff, you see. It was all purely voluntary, and there were some marvelous exchanges of ideas where we had disagreements and discussed things from a different point of view. And I'd say that experience I've had with students at an informal level of exchanging ideas and in debate and controversy, I think those are the things that I remember most and best.
Okay. How has being associated with this school influenced you and changed your life?
Well, I gave the best years of my life here. I taught here for 30 years. And since I've been retired, I've spent 8 years on the advisory board here. And it's influenced me in a number of ways. One thing, I used to be embarrassed when I'd go to meetings of the MLA, the Modern Language Association, the National Professional Organization for Teachers of English, college and university. And I talked to people from these large universities many of whom taught just Shakespeare, that's all they taught, or Chaucer, or the Middle Ages, or the Renaissance, or the 18th century. And they'd say to me, what do you teach down there in Glenville? Well, I'd say, well, I teach everything from Homer down to Wallace Stevens. What kind of an ass is this? He's a damn fool. But, that was probably the greatest influence, as I think about it, was this fact that over the years I taught so many things I didn't know anything about, that I had to study. I was a constant scholar, and I think there was growth in that. Because nobody knows everything. One of the things that you're going to find out as a law student and as a PhD going up for your orals, one of the things that I always said to the PhD candidate, now, the people who are going to cross-examine you, they don't know everything. And they know you don't know everything. So don't try to pose that you know something you don't know. If you don't know it, say, I just don't know that. Because they don't know everything. Yeah. Nobody knows everything, And if they see you're a four-flusher, they'll knock you down because you lack integrity, you see. Uh-huh. And that'll happen when you go up for your, to be admitted to the bar. You won't know everything. You don't know every law or every case. but you will know a lot of them.
Mhm.
And there's one mark of an educated man is a man who knows what he doesn't know and knows what he knows, you know? Just what I said about, well, you know, where you want to bring this down, I want to tell you one thing. You know, one of the things I can take pride in here as a teacher for 30 years, I never use my position as a teacher to cut students down or to belittle them in class. Never. Now, I disagreed oftentimes, but I respected the student's point of view and encouraged him to express his point of view.
Absolutely.
But one time a student came here from Marietta College as a junior, and he took what then was English 315, English literature, which I was teaching, started in the 18th century down to the present. And after about 3 weeks in class, one day he stopped by my class, my desk, and he said, you know, Dr. Miller, he said, I've been listening to you with great intensity. And he said, I've been weighing and evaluating everything you've said. He said, you know, if you want my honest opinion, I don't believe there's a lot of stuff in that poetry you say is in there. I said, well, now, you know, I respect that. You may be right, and let's just start with that. But I said, let's just put it this way. Between now and the end of the semester, why don't you approach everything with this attitude, that not only do I know nothing, I don't even know that I don't know anything. And at the end of the semester, he came by and he said, you know, he said, my God, what an ass I was. He said, you really should have thrown me out when I said you what I said. No, I said, you were being honest. And I had no quarrel with that. I disagreed with you, but I respected your views, even though I knew you were absolutely wrong. But anyhow, you know, there you have it, you see. He gave me what was an honest opinion, but it was a misinformed or ill-informed opinion. Yeah.
Well, I thank you for your time.
TJ, it's been a pleasure talking with you, and it's so nice to talk with an old Braxton County